Hey, what's going on, everyone? Peace to you and yours. Once again, this is me, the baddest chaplain on the globe, Chris B. Hoping all is well with you and yours. And today I am joined by my dear sister, Ashley Williams, CEO of the Well Collective. Ashley, how are you?
Chris, I am well. Thank you for taking a moment and inviting me to be a part of this with you.
No, it's an honor and a privilege for sure, man. It's really a joy, no doubt about it. Absolutely. So, talk to us a bit about your journey and what led you to create the Well Collective. Because I'll tell you, my introduction to the Well Collective was coming to the race exhibit that you all hosted, and
Yeah.
I was at the former location, and I said to my wife or to somebody, maybe even just in my head, I was like, "Yo, this is like the calmest space I've ever walked into." You know what I mean? This is like such a calm, peaceful space. So I just need to know, what was your journey to get you to establish in such a peaceful space like the Waffle?
Yeah. No, I appreciate you naming that and naming that and acknowledging that reflection that you had when you visited our location that's downtown Richmond. And so I actually just acknowledged, and it's becoming really clear to me right now, is that this is my 10th year in work centering well-being, work that centers community care, work that centers self-awareness. My journey began in 2013, actually. It was about 3 years after I had graduated from college. Just, as one does, there's a lot of transition when you move from academia into the world, or when you're moving from being sustained by parentals to then being independent in some capacity. But one of the biggest transitions during that time period for me was the loss of my aunt, who was experiencing cancer during that time. And that just really rocked my world. Her name, Josephine Sonora Bennett, and she was a motherhood figure for me, along with my mom and other phenomenal women in my
For
life.
sure.
Yeah. And so during that time, just watching somewhat of a matriarch and a matriarch of our family, experience, loss of life through cancer, both acknowledging cancer as something that many people around us experience. Also, cancer, it's like a phenomenon of physical health, and then the mental health and the emotional health that it brings. That's exactly what I started experiencing that during that moment of grief with her
Yeah.
passing. And with that, along with everything else that was going on in my world, I really needed something to anchor me and to help me get back into my faith, both as a Christian, but then just my faith in life and in the world
Yeah.
and in family and in healing. And so that led me to finding methods to take better care of my own self. And, what
Yeah.
that looked like was reading a lot more spiritual text, finding my way to counseling and therapy, finding my way, which I think is one of the most important during that time, was finding my way to mindfulness and meditation practices and learning yogic philosophy. And that just really like ignited me into my own self awareness and how to balance and regulate my own emotions during transition or moments of grief or loss of hope. And it
Right.
brought me back into connection. It reignited my faith and my relationship with God and spirit, and that's
Hmm.
bigger than me, because I had lost that. And so during that, I was also working in the mental health and the behavioral health field, and working with
Got you.
youth and young adults and their families that experience varying mental health, either both challenges and or diagnoses. And then also many of them being affected by our incarceration system, whether it's their parents being incarcerated or the adults being incarcerated or the actual youth. And so just
Hmm.
time period in my life in like 2013 to 2015 really created a whole new journey and introduction to my own identity, my own awareness,
Yeah.
and then my own connection to other people. And so in 2015, I formed my very first organization, which was a small business called Bare Soul Yoga and Wellness. And that was really just my invitation to introduce what I had learned through my experience,
Mhm.
and then what I had started to study into my community. So specifically
Mhm.
communities that were I was already involved in, from schools to health systems to organizations serving both youth and adults in a wide range of capacities. And
Mhm.
that's really what's led me now on what is a 10-year journey of,
Right.
of well-being, both for myself and for others. And so last year, I actually ended up closing and sealing Bare Soul Yoga. And
Okay.
I started the Well Collective about 3 years ago, which was really an evolution. And I thought they were the same thing. But as
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
did deeper identity work, and in 2020, when we really, for me, like really experiencing how our identities, from our race to our socioeconomic statuses to our access or lack thereof to health resources and privilege, it just changed. And then there comes birth the Well Collective.
Come on. Come on.
Yeah, which birthed the Well Collective, and really just an invitation to use the awareness and the tools and the resources of self awareness to then enhance our capacity to understand our identity. So then we could then like understand the identity and the experiences of others. And so the Well Collective was formed in 2021, and really just an invitation for people to come together, to learn more about themselves holistically, and then to be in better relationship with others holistically,
Right.
and doing that in a lot of different ways. And so really creating an environment where we're all thriving because we're collectively working together.
And I think there's such a need for spaces where people can bring their whole self. And I'm just really thinking about the ways in which we're socialized to sort of resist that. Like I'm just gonna be my yoga self with my yoga friends, and I'm gonna be like, this is how I am when I'm shopping with my friends. This is how I am when I'm, at work and all these different spaces. And just talk to me a bit about the ways in which you've seen people being sort of relieved by the opportunity to be their whole self, and maybe even ways people kind of be like, whoa, like, I'm not ready for this, like sort of resistance to it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I've seen and experienced both personally, but then in community. And so I always land, and there's statistically, and I started to really lean into this during 2020, 2021, is that we know that social connection, like,
Yeah.
is a direct factor of our mental and emotional well-being. Like, we know it's a place of thriving, and we also know that healthy social connection is a
Right.
direct link to supportive and impactful and helpful mental and social emotional health. And so there's a freedom in being able to show up in your whole self,
Hmm.
in your workplace, in your family, in your community, in your role as a parent and or a child. There's a freedom that is literally like a deep breath when you can just let it all out. Because you're right, we've been conditioned where we act one way at work, and we maybe share a different version of that story at home.
Right.
We,
Right.
or, that's just like not the place to do this thing, or what is someone going to think and or say, or that experience that's a little too heavy to name in this group of people. So when someone asks you how you are, just say I'm good. Right.
Right.
And that is for me the exact opposite of what freedom and liberation land in, even if it's
Hmm.
just a story or an engagement. And so we get this opportunity, and I've witnessed this opportunity of when you create a space where you say, yeah, come as you are, or you create a space that's just like, oh, I can handle the truth. Please, I have the time. Can you share? People give an opportunity to just, to be, right? And then there's the opposite end of that, where that when that space is given, and maybe the experience is that, one might not know healthy relationship of what it looks like to be yourself, or the power that we hold is scary or fearful because, it's going to require us to grow. And that's one thing that I've had
Yeah.
the opportunity to witness a lot in our leadership development programming, is that we're powerful as humans, right?
Yeah.
Each of us individually have these like
Mhm.
strong, beautiful gifts. And it can be scary to step into the fullness of who we are if we know who we are, because it's going to many times require us to be disciplined or to master a thing. It's going to require us to use a voice that, may not please or another person or may make someone upset. It may require us to take a risk or a leap, and that can be really scary.
Right.
And so I've also witnessed when giving opportunity or being in spaces where opportunity to be the fullness of yourself is there, is that there can also be a complete withdrawal and
Mhm.
anger
Mhm.
and disconnection and resentment when
Right.
those spaces are then created. And so rather than, leaning into whatever being our whole self means, sometimes it's
Mhm.
very easy to just
Yeah.
step away. And so
Absolutely.
I've definitely seen both happen in many cases.
Mm.
And many times when I see the cases where people and or myself step back, the more I get to know the fullness of self, I still show back up. I might not show back up in
Mhm.
the moment, but I'll learn what needs to happen. And I think that's a part of the journey too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm stuck on what you were saying about the ways in which people kind of like will see freedom or see the opportunity to be their whole self or be their most powerful version of themselves and kind of pull back away from that. It makes me just think about two aspects of it. One, that sort of feeling of peace and feeling of rest that I encountered walking into the Law Collective and just like being there, in large part is aided by people having the latitude to be their full selves for sure. And then just thinking about just all that a person would have to unlearn if this is a new habit, if this is a sort of new opportunity, if you will. There's so much unlearning that has, and just curious to see like how you all emphasize and really like inculcate a sense of belonging and support within the collective where you have folks from such different social locations, particularly thinking about the locations that are afforded more latitude than others.
I think that, the first thing that pops into mind when it comes to belonging, and this is sometimes a an accepting thought, and sometimes it's like, but
Yeah, yeah.
belonging and creating spaces of belonging is as easy as it is hard
Mhm.
when bringing people from all different walks of life and experiences are together, because the one thing of similarity is that we have this natural sense of belonging. Like our humanness has this natural sense of belonging, but our experiences many
Come on now.
times has this like learned experience of rejection or guard or resistance to the unfamiliar. And so what I have learned over the past 10 years, that complete authentic vulnerability is necessary, not just as someone who gets the opportunity to steward and create a space that we desire to have real, authentic, sustainable belonging there,
Mhm.
but that the vulnerability and authenticity and the truth from those that are then showing up is needed to be seen, right? To create a space where I'm not ashamed of being seen for who I am. And I'm also vulnerable and willing to be truthful about who I am. So I think what has been needed is raw, honest truth
Mhm.
of, how we relate to people, how we see people, how we hear people. And that
Mhm.
requires dialogue. It's required a lot of missteps.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
required a lot of apology and affirmation. And I say that because, I think a space of belonging, of intentional belonging, specifically of one that brings in diverse experiences, it's really
Mhm.
easy to foster a sense of connection through a one off event, right? The creating a space of sustainable, consistent truth, vulnerability, long standing is where the realness of belonging comes in, because it requires you to acknowledge when not when you were right, acknowledge when you did something helpful, acknowledge when you did something
Mhm,
unhelpful. It's
mhm,
an
mhm.
opportunity to then actually intentionally invite in people, right? So you actually intentionally, because sometimes people aren't going to show up, right? Like if it's
For sure.
unfamiliar or you're not familiar with spaces of connection or community and the ways in which we specifically hope for it to be,
Yeah.
we have to specifically invite people and say,
Mhm.
like, you're welcome here, like, you're invited, like, whether that's an email or a phone call or a bring a friend
Yeah.
situation. It's a space of like, we actually need agreement. So, one of our practices is ensuring that we create a community agreements that are standard for everything that we do, but are revisited when we gather folks. And so I think that's just really helpful. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing is that inviting people to take ownership and leadership of their role in showing up. Their role, their reason, and their purpose for showing up, whether it's just to like feel a sense of rest in their nervous system, whether
Mhm.
it's to dive deep into dialogue about a conversation or a topic, or whether it's just, I'm curious, but inviting people to take ownership of that. And that's one thing that I've definitely learned is that, we're all individuals and we're coming for a specific reason for ourselves. And so the intention of creating a space for people to gather and to be well is not, it can be created, but it's not necessarily full responsibility of what the outcome's going to look like
Sure, sure.
as someone who then leads, because that then leads to my own burnout. Right. And also, I don't wish to
Right.
control a thing, nor do I wish the people that are creating the space to control a thing, because it's exact opposite of what this liberating space is meant to be.
Yeah. I'm just hearing you, Ashley, and wondering about how folks who describe themselves or move through the world as perfectionists and the way they must like freak out because the way that this sort of liberation work really undoes a lot of what we learned through perfectionism and those standards of like the way you're supposed to present, the way you're supposed to have, an expected outcome every single time. I'm just stuck on just the ways that this must jam folks up if they're expecting it to have like a perfectionist out.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. The look in people's eyes, right? And even just me when I'm like, oh my gosh, this needs to be perfect. I'm like, actually, this is not what is perfect at any moment. Like these are the conversations that
Right.
I have to have with myself of,
Mm,
like who told us what perfect was?
come
Who
on.
told us what perfect was? What does that even look like? What does it feel like? And if I were to do a body scan right now, perfection to me feels like jarring, and it feels tight, and it
Mm,
feels,
mhm,
you know, um, it doesn't feel necessarily well. There feels like a striving that's there. And so, that's a part of, how we create our community agreements. One of them is like say or ask the question in the language that you have. Like,
mm.
don't wait until you have the perfect words. Like, we'll figure it out
Right.
together, right? Like, that's what we're here for.
Mm,
And, if you step on your meditation cushion or you're in a group class that is intended to create a relaxing space, but you're
yeah.
jarred and you can't close your eyes or the mind is wondering, like, can we at least find some gratitude that you just showed up? Right?
Come
Like,
on.
can we do that, because your presence is key, and maybe it might require more than that one perfect time to then show up. So, you know, that's one thing that has been important, is to really describe what
Mm,
embodiment of values looks like and invite people to feel what it looks like to be non-judgmental, both of themselves and others. What does it feel like to be not attached to an outcome and just be in the present moment? What does it feel like to like say exactly what is on your mind
mm.
and be okay with how it comes out, because we trust that we're going to be able to talk it out. And so I think the perfectionism that's been a real challenge for us as a society. And it's a huge unlearning
Yeah,
practice is to just be present in the progress or the process and not perfect in it because it's so limiting.
truly limiting. And it allows us to undervalue the wealth of the journey and just be so locked into the destination that none of the journey actually matters.
Yeah. And once we get to, I think that's, you bring up such a good point. Like if we don't learn the lessons or have the experiences of the process of what the journey is offering us, we're not growing. We're just doing
Nope.
a thing. Right. And we hear that so much, like
Sure.
the difference between being and doing, like, that's a cliche statement now,
Yeah,
but being able to just be who we are at any given moment, even amidst all of the things that are happening in our environment, all of the things that are happening in maybe our work or our family, all the things that are affected by in our systems, there's these statuses or structures that we're meant to either fall into or that we're either meant to like perpetuate or live into. And that's already an invitation to be perfect, right? And to do as I say or be as, I was told.
for
And
sure.
that takes away the creativity and the curiosity. And so just an invitation to be in practice of releasing our perfectionism that everything around us many times invites us into is such a power move, and so freeing.
Right. So talk to me about the way in which you all use storytelling in the work, because I've experienced the power of the story and the power of allowing someone to tell their story and listening to their story, how that can be a liberative tool as well. So what role does storytelling play in your work?
Yeah, so I take that in two ways. So storytelling, just as an organization, right, has been really key in the development of our impact in our work and inviting people to be engaged and be a part of the movement. And I will say, as what was and has been a small team of people doing the work with, very limited resources, even though it looks like, they're flowing, but with very limited resources, we had actually really had an opportunity to storytell, to say, like, this is who the Well Collective is. This is why we're here. This is, these are our values and this is how we embody them. This is where we gain our motivation from the past and our past leaders, and civil rights activists and movements and historians, you know, that's how we formed. But like storytelling at the very beginning of the creation of just the organization and this movement as a whole was so limited because we were like 10 toes down, boots on the ground, and just, things
So I make it
moving,
work.
trying to make it work. And so storytelling has been key now because when we talk about the Well Collective, when we talk about a collective of people being in collective action, there needs to be more voice. There needs to be more story. There needs to be more the why and the reasonings. And also, not that we're doing anything new, but a lot of our work is ongoing from many of the people that came before us.
For
And
sure.
that to me is key to show the streamline between past, present, and then for now, when it comes to storytelling, how do we then begin to create vision and hope for the future,
Right.
specifically when there's many opportunities that are right in front of our eyes in media and the news, and just like even in our local spheres of influences in our neighborhood, that isn't really giving light or vision to a very hopeful future, right? And so storytelling right now is key to continuing spaces of hope, continuing spaces of motivation and inspiration, continuing spaces of giving people opportunity to share their experience and to really understand not just our world, but our city, but our people that
Right.
we are meant to be in relationship with in a better way. So, storytelling, of course, on the organizational is important, but right now too, storytelling is key to help us reimagine how we can be in better relationship to ourselves, to each other, whether you're telling a story about yourself, like how I just shared the story about, what led me to this work. The story I always go to in that it's the loss of my aunt. It's the disconnection that transition and grief led me to. And that's where my heart is, and it's what drives me and motivates me to keep moving forward. And even though it is a story of grief, right? There's so much gratitude in that I'm
Sure.
able to share it now without crying. Like the
That
first
part.
5, 6 years, to be on here just like bawling because
I got
there was
me.
still so much emotion. And so just the
Right.
opportunity to share, whether it's a moment of celebration, whether it's a grief or a loss, whether it's an affirmation that you're speaking to yourself, or an experience that happened to you that led to shame or guilt. Storytelling and words are so powerful because it gives us an opportunity to have formalized like the sensations that have happened in our body that might
Yes.
have needed some time to digest, right? So, story, word, it's like, yes, the processing, but it's like the tangible of what this human body has experienced. And then you get the opportunity to then be in relationship with another person and see how they've alchemized feeling or emotion or experience. And that's the part that connects us. That's then our
For sure.
humanness, like, and I think story is so important because it's the one thing outside of just being in quiet presence with someone that then has an opportunity to connect on this like level that is deeper than this external skin that we have or this external experience. It brings us into this like embodiment of emotion. And we all have those. We all have
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. What you're saying is just so powerful to me because I think about all that you're saying through the language of breakthrough, right? Like there's
Mm,
stories that would have been impossible to tell, and I mentioned this on the earlier episode where my aunt who passed away during the pandemic, where she I remember having lunch with her years prior to it, and we're having a great time. And she's just telling me all about her adventures in Jamaica. And I was like, her name is Aunt Phyllis. So, Aunt Phyllis, you gotta let me write this story for you. Like this story is too good to just not share. And she got really serious and said, no, I can't share these stories. And just like all the like the party and celebration just like shut down. Like someone unplugged it. And I just think about, when she passed away with, I only got a part of that story, the portion of that story. And she never had the freedom to tell the whole story to everybody. And I think
mm.
that the way that you're talking about sharing your own story and having a space where people, eventually can feel free enough to tell their story is really like powerful liberation work for real.
Yeah. And that is so, I first love to hear that you just had a moment and opportunity to be with your aunt and take in with her and like connect in that way. It just resonates so deeply because, and in this journey, especially over the past couple of years with the Well Collective, what's been really key is like that intersection of history, both
Hmm.
intergenerationally and culturally,
Right.
and
Right.
how that is so healing. And so
Hmm.
creating spaces where, are intentionally created where we are learning about those and experiences of those from varying generations, because that is such a tool of wisdom and identity.
Yes,
And
for
also, it
sure.
gives this like feeling of hope or change. It's so inspiring, whether it's a story of like resilience, right? Like,
Mm,
it's like, what I love is hearing the stories. Yes, for my grandma, right? Like, that's just, I am grateful to have a 92-year-old grandma that,
come
in
on.
this moment like can share things. And there's still some things she's like, no, Ashley, not right now, or I'll tell you, but
Right.
this doesn't come until, later on in life. And I'm like, what? But, so that's so valuable to me. It
Yeah.
teaches me, and what I think it teaches those that are around her are like how to prepare for
Yes.
life, right? How to
Yes.
step into identity, for me as a Black woman that's living in
Hmm.
America, from my
Right.
92-year-old grandmother that was a Black woman that lived through America. And, you know, that to me is such a gift. And so with the
Yes.
Well Collective, I've had and have been creating the opportunity for like intergenerational and multicultural dialogue where, yeah, we get an opportunity to learn and ask questions, but like pass down the wisdom. Like, can we bridge
Come
the
on.
gap between generations to
Ain't that
learn from those that are right around us? And so, one of the taglines or, one of the intention statements that we have is, you know, it's intersecting history, healing, and humanity, with the understanding that when we have an opportunity to look at our past, acknowledge it, accept it, be with it, we get this opportunity to then accept in the future, accept in our present moment how we're going to then prepare for our future. And
no
we can
doubt.
use healing practices to move through whatever scenario or situation is brought up for us. We get the opportunity to get good at regulating so that we can hold these
Right.
experiences and learn from
Come
them and
on.
be okay with them and take them
Yeah.
in rather than resist them. And then, that then creates a space where we move towards humanity because we get to see all, we get to be
Hmm.
all. But then it brings us back to that space of love. And one of my teachers, Michelle Cassandra Johnson, she's from Richmond but lives in North Carolina. And
Got
she
you.
does a lot of racial healing work and embodiment and intuitive guidance. And she says, humanity is founded in love, right? And like the
Yes.
the core
Right.
emotion of humanity is love. And so
Right.
when we are cut off of honoring and acknowledging the humanity in others, whether it's from age or race, ethnicity, position, privilege, health, but when
Yeah.
we don't see another human, or we don't see them, or we're
Right.
disconnected from them, we're disconnected from love, and our body
No
cannot
question.
be well. It cannot be
No.
well when we are then disconnected from love, if that's what we're founded on. And so creating spaces of storytelling, experience sharing of all experiences, ones that are pleasant and unpleasant, is definitely like vital and key toward the wholeness of ourselves, physically, mentally, emotionally, culturally, socially, financially, intellectually, spiritually. Like the wholeness of the self
Yes.
depends on our capacity to be in connection with our own experience and others in real ways that move us forward to love. So I'm an advocate for creating space to continue storytelling.
Yes.
Yeah, specifically now, because, just with all of the disconnection and the erasure of
Come on.
history and our
Yes.
access to it, I'm also just like, oh, we need to do our own storytelling. So like you having this
Have
podcast,
to.
like things that we can like, yes, newspapers, but create our own newspapers these days, not the ones that are
Right.
managed by federal gov. And it's a priority and a responsibility now to continue
Hmm.
storytelling and create our own vehicles for it.
No question. No question. And man, just so much of what you said just really resonates with me. But just going back particularly to that whole sense of us being created in love, and love being like that primary like foundation for us. And it just tells us so to the degree in which people are disconnected from their true selves, that we're seeing love looks like such a seldom visitor, or something that you have to like fight to assert. They have to almost need to attach love to a rocket ship to get it through this hateful atmosphere. Just thinking about all the ways in which creating spaces and doing the storytelling, doing the work on this local level, that helps to turn the tide for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, and intentionally creating spaces where love is practiced, like in real ways, is so key. Because then once again, love looks different for all experiences right
For sure.
now because of whether, like, depending on the way that we were raised in our childhood home,
That
the
part.
way that we were given love or were able to then share our love, and that's another thing that has to be created, like a base level. And so we always go back to, and when I say we, like the Well Collective, one of our
Got you.
founding text that we tend to go to is Bell Hooks' All About Love,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
just a foundational and fundamental book to really understand the truest definition of love, what it looks like for self, for community and romantic relationship, in government and politics across race relations. And that has been a book that, I encourage everyone that is around me as
Mhm.
well as within the community to read. So we have a streamline or like a fundamental definition of where we're kind of moving in love from. And so I think that's been key is being able to practice what love looks like, unlearn what love isn't, so we then can learn what it is.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Anytime I get
Yeah.
a chance to read Bell Hooks is a happy day.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I consider her essential. Essential. That sister
Yeah.
is essential. No
Yeah,
question.
essential.
So obviously I'm a fan. I think there's a lot of people who appreciate your work. Talk to me about the sort of challenges you've had in the Well Collective, because I think for all people who are establishing a dream or pushing forth a wonderful idea, or dare I even say doing prophetic work, there's
Yeah.
always folks who can't see it. So what challenges did you face in getting the Well Collective to where it is right now?
Yeah. What challenges have I faced? Am I facing
Am I facing
daily, minute
expected
by
face right?
minute? What surprising lessons have I learned?
Some more, all of that.
And so I appreciate you even naming and speaking loud prophetic work because I never sat down to write a vision down, right? Like when someone says, like, what do you want to do in 5 years? My version, oh, I want to help people, right? And then I'm like, oh, what does help really mean? And
Yeah.
then help. And then I found this quote, help is the sunny side up of control. And I'm like, Lord, let's just
No,
stop on things. I'm like, I'm
no.
not trying to. So, just as I shared, how did I start where my journey started? It came with my own practice of taking care of myself and understanding spirit for myself, understanding my relationship with God, creating space for it, growing through my own challenges and unlearning behaviors that maybe were taught to me or that I experienced or perpetuated that just were not helpful for myself or others. And so I want to name that as that I myself have been a challenge in this vision that I have learned or have been given, right, over my lifetime. And so the biggest challenges of just being with steadfast faith
Mhm, mhm.
and releasing, having an unwavering faith has been key.
Yeah.
But from the building of the tangible, I think just being in a space where people and humanness is real and it's fragile and it's powerful. And, in creating space for that, you have to be open and willing and non-judgmental and loving. You also have to be very not very, also have to understand your own personal boundaries and
Sure.
capacities when creating those spaces. And so some of my challenges at the very beginning and that have showed up is the value that I have for myself both when it's amazingly high and then when it's like, oh, you girl, you're not seeing your whole self right now and you let stuff pass when building relationship and building spaces. I've learned that being very clear for myself who I am,
Mhm,
what my boundaries are, what this vision is has been key to
mhm.
creating a container that can then hold other people that can then get clear, be okay with their own growth and their own challenges, and then continue to show up. That's one thing. But when it comes to from a resource standpoint, my vision of the Well Collective and how I show up in servant leadership is definitely come during my quiet time with God and asking him to just to use me and guide me and to stay with me. And I've had to learn how to not say why, right? And just say, thank
Yeah.
you for giving me this. Please provide me with the strength and the tools
Come
to
on.
then get through it, right? And so when given a vision of creating space, and even with this past year, I just purchased a historic branch building in downtown Richmond
Right.
and
Right.
creating a space that I hope to be a destination site for not just those that are in Richmond as a space of healing and educational learning, but for the world. and
Yeah.
for people to come and heal here, it came and it's coming with a $7.5 million price tag. And so,
Mm.
I think when taking a prophetic vision and needing to turn it into something real, and taking vision and ambition and seeing things that happened in meditation or in my deepest moments with God and spirit and my ancestors, you know, I quite frankly either have to get really clear and concise on my language
Right?
and also get really clear and concise on what impact is going to look like, because I didn't start this with a business plan. I started this with a viewing. Like, I started this with an image
Man,
and a moment of
yeah.
silence. And so that's kind of probably been my biggest challenge, has
Mm.
been specifically as raising resources and getting people to trust that this is a thing that is going to happen and will happen and
Yes.
requires,
Yes.
a big scale for, yes, me and my organization, but it requires all people of all socioeconomic levels to show up, those that have those resources and those that hold them,
For sure.
even without a track record of that. And so what I'm finding is that the way that our world operates is that, needing a business plan clearly, right? But needing to get really clear, this is who is being served, this is how they're being served. And the questions like,
Mhm.
how do you know that this will work? I I believe in people, right?
Yeah.
I believe in people, and that's not always the best answer, but it's the answer.
That's the
And
answer.
so, yeah, and it's the answer. And so I think, the funding of the work, you know, I don't see it as a challenge. I see it as a way to invite people to do things differently than we've done them. And that's been my work for the past couple of years and the programs that we've created, that, it's just to do things differently. And then I think another challenge is inviting people to, like, take ownership and find their role to be a part of it, right? Like, delegation is one thing, but I hope for sustainable, like,
Yeah.
work together. And that has to come from deep inside people, right? Like, that has to come from deep inside people for them to pass it on to their friends, to pass it on to their kids, to keep showing up. And that is both a challenge and a moment of inspiration to keep going, because I trust that we can do that.
For sure. For sure. You said something actually that made me think about the ways, and sort of, I would describe it as the folly of mankind, in that we use the business metric as a universal metric, right? So there are things that are worth something, that are valuable, that come out of the well collective, that cannot show up on a P&L sheet. Like, it just is no way of tracking it, and just trying to sort of reduce the success of it to something that can be measured in that way. There's a loss there that I don't think enough people appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you, summarizing that and bringing that in, because that just, that really is what it has been, right? Like, people want
Mhm.
the quantitative data when the
Yes.
qualitative data, specifically, without making it a marketing tool, right? So, like,
Right.
for me, what has been challenging is that, like, the power of one's vulnerability and the way that people might open up about their struggles is not something that we're necessarily taping to then amplify to
Mhm.
say, this is the work and what's happening. And
For
then,
sure.
that's a personal story, and unless it's just intentionally there. So I think that, the way that we're set up, our world needs to see people in despair to then
Mm,
trust that a thing is happening. And I'd like to
right.
flip that, right? Like,
Come on.
I'd like to flip that. The Well Collective is not just here for the people that are in despair, because we're all in despair at some moment in time. It's just up to us and
For
whether
sure.
we're going to acknowledge it or not,
That
right?
part.
But that, the words of, solidarity, or, I'm giving to those that are in need at some point in time in our life. We're all in need of something physically, mentally, emotionally,
No
socially,
question.
energetically. And so that, to me, and creating a space where you're not giving to the need, you're giving to the reimagination and the creation of something different.
Right.
And so it's
Right.
hard for me to like then pinpoint someone's vulnerability or story many times in a way that I know is going to be used for like impact numbers. But
Yeah.
that's been one of my things is like how to capture that, how to name that. And that's where the storytelling comes in, is just open invitation for people. Like if you've had an experience that's worth sharing and you know that, you know, this space or these relationships have been helpful for you, this program, this education has been helpful for you, you know, I invite you to take ownership of that and share. And maybe that brings someone along, maybe whether that's a friend or someone that doesn't see themselves here, right? That's engagement, or whether it's a funder that's like interested but wants to see impact. Like, can you tell that story? You know, but we formalize so many things. And, you know, I'm getting into it a little bit more now because I realize that it is a need, but wanting to staying true to the vision and the mission
Yeah. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
honoring vulnerability, creating sustainable impact, continuing to bring all walks of life along is a learning opportunity to just do it differently.
No question. No question. So, Ashley, tell me, how can people who are watching this, who are listening to this, support you, support your work, get involved with the Walk Collective?
Yeah. So there's so many ways to support. And so whether it's joining our events, we have many program offerings, everything from group classes to trainings to workshops, community building programs, healing arts programs, things that you can take care of yourself, things that you can do with your work, your family. So definitely attending those. You can become an annual member, which just says, I'm here for the cause. I want to see this happen. I'm about it, whether you're local and you show up in a physical things, or you're across the globe and you're showing up virtually, or you're just saying, this is happening in Richmond. Let me support. Annual membership is key. And then other ways, we need resources and funding to make sure that the Well Collective has a strong, sustainable home for
Mm,
all to visit. And so
yeah.
everyone can visit the Well Collective dot space online, read all about our mission, read all about our impact, our programs, our offerings, ways to get involved through volunteering, through bringing your skills, your resources. And then also, if you just want to have a personal conversation, email your girl, you know, like sit
There it
down, have
is.
coffee virtually or in person. But we all have a role to play in creating a well world. And there are so many different ways to do it that have varying time capacities, that have varying interests. And so that's my invitation to people, is to get involved that way.
Hear that, hear that. See, there's a tiered system. There's different ways, different options. Be like, oh, I'm too busy, or I don't have no. There's a way. There's a way.
Yeah,
That's what Ashley just
there's a
laid out
way.
for you. Sure. Absolutely. This has been a joy. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. And as always, you can watch this on baddestchaplain.com. Much love to you and yours. Until next time, take care and be kind to others. Peace.
Peace.